Hey folks, happy Monday to you. We continue our pastor's devotional series. Day one for this week, our theme this week for the devotional series, we live as a blessing in the world. So this is the final core principle. We live as a blessing in the world. We've been through 8 core principles now. So this is the final one. It provides the overarching theme for this week, and then the prayer calendar provides us with a daily kind of theme or thought. The daily thought today says, "Blessed are the ... and we're going to read a passage from Mathew chapter 5. So Gospel of Mathew chapter 5. Turn over there. Wonderful passage that if you're around Bible studies or church sermons or anything for any length of time, you've certainly heard this one. So hear these words. We're going to read Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Wonderful, wonderful passage. So I want to walk through this passage with you, but I would also point out that this passage can be found in the Gospel of Luke. It's in Luke chapter, I'm getting there right now. I can never remember if it's chapter 6 or 7 in Luke. It's Luke chapter 6, verse 20. You might go there and read that passage. It's just a little bit different. And there's a whole sort of understanding about why it's different, the different background that Luke comes from as a writer, as opposed to Matthew, and sort of changing things. So this is a sermon of Jesus, and they're recounting this sermon. And so the goal was not necessarily to recount it word for word. The goal was to tell it in the way that was the most meaningful for the people there. So in the same way, if you were telling a story, you might insert something different, you might change a word, you might change something here or there so that it's the most meaningful to the listener. And so Matthew kind of has his emphasis, and Luke has a little bit different emphasis. Read those two together. I wonder if you might find where the differences are. So let's go to Matthew. I'm just going to walk through this real quick. It's really hard to understand. So really, blessed are those who mourn, and sometimes we kind of spiritualize it. Well, I mean, if you're mourning, you're blessed because then God's presence is with you. But isn't God's presence always with us? And if you're mourning, you're blessed because then people are coming around you and caring for you, and that's true. But let me give you a different sort of thought process about this particular passage. So blessed are the poor in spirit. In the Old Testament, there is an idea of being rich in the spirit or poor in the spirit. Poor in the spirit were people who were humble. If you were rich in the spirit, then you would be someone who thought that you were on a level playing field with God. I don't really need God. I've got everything right. I've never done anything wrong. I don't need to confess my sins in any way. But opposite that, poor in spirit were ones who knew that God was still above you and were trying to attain the perfection of God. So the poor in spirit are blessed because we understand we're not there yet. And we're still working on this. So poor in spirit, then blessed are those who mourn. So blessed are those who mourn the fact that we are not as God created us to be yet. I mean, you you could not mourn that. You can just say, well, I'm not as good as I should be, and who really cares? And I'm going to go on being that. Or you can say, I'm not everything that God desires me to be, and I mourn that because I want to be there where God desires me to be. Blessed are the meek. Now, we don't go around telling our kids to be meek when they're, growing up. That's not a word that we use often. But think of something that is like pliable. So like, clay or Play-Doh or something like that. Meek is something that can be transformed. So the idea of meek in this passage is something that can be molded and changed and transformed. So think about this now. We're poor in spirit. We're not everything that God desires us to be. We mourn that reality. We are open to being molded by God. Okay, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So we know that the way to get to where God wants us to be is a righteousness. And so we're meek and we're hungering and thirsting to be right with God in every way, that it is at the forefront of our mind. We are studying, we are worshiping, we are praying, we are serving, we are doing the things, trying to open ourselves to the working of God, because we hunger and thirst for that. Not for the other stuff, for that we hunger and thirst. Then blessed are those who are merciful. Sometimes what we can fall into the trap of doing is when we are perhaps not everything that we want to be, rather than just concentrating on ourselves and hungering and thirsting for that righteousness, what we'll do is begin pointing at other people who are less than us, that they are worse off than us, that they are farther from God than us. But blessed are the merciful, who don't need to turn our attention upon what other people are doing apart from God. We're just hungering and thirsting that we might be together with God. And blessed are the pure in heart. So mercy is really about action. So I don't point out, well, yeah, but I'm more faithful than that person over there. I mean, that's an act of mercy, that I'm not pointing out, I'm not pushing them down when they're down. But pure of heart is a different thing, isn't it? Because pure of heart doesn't even have to come out of our mouth. We can think we're better than that other person. We can think that we're more faithful, so that's enough. We can think, well, we're more faithful than that person. But pure of heart takes that even thought out of our minds. It has nothing to do with that other person's spirituality. Our righteousness has nothing to do with whether that person is right or good. Our righteousness lies upon us. And so pure in heart says, not only will I be merciful to those others, but I won't even spend a thought about how I am better than the other, because all I am worried about is my righteousness. And then finally, blessed are the peacemakers. So if you do all of these things, well, what you'll discover is that you become at peace with God. You become at peace because you're hungering and thirsting for righteousness. You become at peace with other people because you are merciful. And you become at peace with yourself because you begin walking closer to God in that righteousness, in that image that God has created us to be. So all of it adds up to a peacemaker. We're not talking about a peacemaker here just in terms of someone who puts down their guns, but a peacemaker, someone who has made peace with God, self, other. Does that sound like a command that Jesus said? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. Those three. And so what some have suggested is that this sermon that Jesus was teaching was really a plan for discipleship, a plan to get from where you are now to where God would desire you to be in the image of God. It's beautiful. It's beautiful when it's explained this way, I believe. And I hope that each of us has a plan for how to get from where we are today to where God would most desire us to be. Might you begin working that plan today. God bless.